My name is Alyssa Morgan. I'm 29 years old. And the strange thing about being asked to choose between love and loyalty is that by the time the question is asked, the answer has already been decided. 3 months ago, I ended a relationship that, on paper, should have worked. Not because I stopped loving him. Not because he betrayed me, but because he asked me to walk away from someone who couldn't walk anymore. I've known Ethan Cole since 3rd grade. That's 21 years of shared history. Longer than most marriages, honestly. And a lot steadier, too. We grew up 3 houses apart, rode the same school bus, played on the same baseball team for 6 years. Him at shortstop, me in the outfield. Both of us pretending we weren't keeping score of who did better. We got our driver's licenses the same week, celebrated at the same diner, talked about moving out, growing up, building lives that, somehow, always included each other. He was supposed to be the best man at my future wedding. That part didn't happen. Last April, everything changed. A delivery truck ran a red light, 45 miles an hour, straight into the driver's side of Ethan's car. He spent 11 days in the ICU. I remember the machines, the smell, the way time stretched and folded in on itself while I sat in a chair that became more familiar than my own bed. When he finally woke up, he couldn't feel his legs.
T. Spinal cord injury. Incomplete.
The doctor said that word like it was hope.
Incomplete.
Like maybe something would come back. Like maybe it wouldn't. Like uncertainty was supposed to be comforting. Ethan was 29 years old and learning how to use a wheelchair before he even left the hospital. He doesn't have much family. His mom passed when we were in high school. His dad remarried and moved overseas. Calls twice a year, if that. There's a half-sister somewhere. They've met 4 times. So when the hospital started asking about discharge plans, about who would help him transition home, I was the one sitting in that meeting. Not because I was the best option, because I was the only one. At first, I told myself I'd just help where I could, a few days a week. After work, driving him to physical therapy, helping with transfers, cooking meals that wouldn't require him to balance hot pans from a seated position, fighting with insurance companies that treated basic medical equipment like luxury purchases. It was exhausting. But it never felt optional. It was Ethan. You don't weigh that kind of thing. You just show up. At the time, I'd been dating Ryan for about 14 months. He was easy, funny, sharp. The kind of man who knew how to make a room feel lighter just by walking into it. We'd talked loosely about moving in together by the end of the year. Nothing serious yet, just possibility. After the accident, my life shifted hard. My schedule revolved around Ethan's needs. Some weeks, I was at his house more than my own. At first, Ryan didn't say much, just small things. You're going over there again tonight? Doesn't his insurance cover help for that? Questions that sounded reasonable, until they weren't. I feel like I'm dating your calendar, he said one night. We were sitting in his apartment, takeout containers open between us, the TV playing something neither of us was watching. I'm trying to balance it, I told him. And I was. I planned date nights. I showed up when I could. I canceled only when I had to. But some weeks weren't kind. In August, Ethan developed a pressure sore that got infected. I was at his place every day for 2 weeks, managing wound care, driving him to follow-ups, watching his face tighten in pain he tried not to show. Ryan noticed. Of course he did. He hit his limit in early October. He set his chopsticks down mid-meal, looked at me like he'd already rehearsed what he was about to say, and said, "We need to talk about him." My chest tightened. Okay, what about him? He didn't hesitate. He makes me uncomfortable. The whole situation does. I stared at him, waiting for something softer to follow. It didn't. I feel like I'm competing with a grown man for my girlfriend's time, he continued. And I'm losing. He's paralyzed, I said quietly. He's not competing with you. He needs help. He needs a professional caregiver, not you. He can't afford full-time care. His insurance covers 12 hours a week. That's it. Ryan leaned back, exhaling like I was missing something obvious. That's not your problem, Melissa. I remember putting my food down very carefully because I knew once I spoke, there was no walking it back. It is my problem, I said, because he's my best friend. And I'm not going to abandon him because it's inconvenient for my dating life. Ryan's expression changed. Not anger, something colder, more final. It's him or me, he said, just like that. I'm serious. I can't keep doing this. You need to choose. The room went very quiet. I looked at him, at the man I thought I might build a future with, and I realized something that felt strangely calm. He wasn't asking me to choose. He was asking me to become someone else. I understand your feelings, I said. He waited. I think he expected a compromise, an apology, a negotiation. Instead, I took a breath and said, I hope you find someone who gives you what you need. But I'm not going to stop taking care of Ethan. Ryan blinked. Are you breaking up with me right now? You gave me an ultimatum, so you're choosing him over me. You asked me to pick, I said. I picked. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. You're going to regret this, he said. I promise you that. Then he left. I sat there for a while, 10 minutes maybe, eating cold noodles, feeling nothing. Not sadness, not relief. Just that hollow, suspended quiet where emotions haven't caught up yet, but you know they're coming. The next day, I blocked his number, not out of anger, out of experience, because I knew what came next if I didn't. The messages, the arguments, the slow erosion of whatever clarity I had left. Clean break. Done. A week later, I moved into Ethan's guest room. His house was already partially adapted. Ramp installed, wider doorways, space to maneuver, and I was already there more often than not. It just made sense. I still paid my share of rent at my old apartment until the lease ended. It hurt financially, but I wasn't about to leave my roommate scrambling. Ethan watched me carry in my second duffel bag and raised an eyebrow. So let me get this straight, he said. You dumped your boyfriend and moved in with a guy in a wheelchair? I smirked. When you say it like that, it sounds questionable. People are going to talk. Let them, I said. You still have ESPN? He grinned. Obviously. We watched football that night, and for the first time in weeks, everything felt exactly where it was supposed to be. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought Ryan would move on, find someone who fit his life better, and that would be that. I underestimated how personally he took being chosen against. That was my mistake. I thought the breakup would be the end of it.
Clean. Final. Quiet.
I was wrong. The first wave didn't come from him directly. It came through other people. At first, it was subtle. A friend texting me less. Another canceling plans without rescheduling. Group chats going quiet the moment I said something. Then one of my college friends messaged me out of the blue. Hey, just so you know, Ryan's been telling people some stuff about you. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. What kind of stuff? There was a pause. Then, he's saying you're emotionally dependent on Ethan. Like, not in a romantic way, but that you have this unhealthy attachment. That you have a savior complex and can't maintain adult relationships. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded so rehearsed.
Clinical.
Like he'd taken something messy and human and run it through a filter to make it sound like a diagnosis. Cool, I typed back. Is he diagnosing everyone now or just me? Just you, my friend replied, then added, he called me an enabler last week though, so I think I'm on the list. Some people didn't believe him, but some did, and the ones who didn't ask me. They just stepped back.
Quietly.
Like I'd become something uncomfortable to be around. I won't lie. That part stung. More than I expected. But I didn't have the luxury of sitting in it. Ethan's physical therapy schedule didn't care about my social life. His medications didn't pause because I was being misrepresented. So I kept going. Morning routines, transfers, appointments. Life didn't stop. It just got lonelier. in the background. 2 weeks after the breakup, he showed up. Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen, making scrambled eggs. Nothing fancy, just something quick before Ethan's afternoon appointment. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. And there he was, Ryan, perfectly put together, hairstyled, clean shirt. The kind of outfit that said this wasn't spontaneous, this was planned. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't move. "We really don't." His jaw tightened. "You blocked me. You disappeared. That's not how adults handle things. You gave me an ultimatum about my best friend who can't walk," I said evenly. "I think we handled it pretty clearly." He stepped forward like he was going to walk inside. I didn't step back. For a second, we just stood there. A quiet standoff in a doorway that suddenly felt smaller than it was. Then his eyes shifted, past me, into the hallway. "Is he here?" he asked. "He lives here," I said. "So yeah, I want to talk to him too. He needs to understand what he's doing to your life." Something cold settled in my chest. Before I could respond, I heard the soft, familiar sound of wheels against hard wood. Ethan rolled into the hallway behind me. He'd heard everything. Of course he had. He looked at Ryan, completely calm, and said, "I'd stand up to greet you, but, you know." He gestured lightly to the chair. For half a second, there was silence. Then Ryan's face flushed, not embarrassment. Anger. Pure, sharp anger. "You think this is funny?" he snapped, looking between us. "You're throwing away a real relationship to... what? Play house?" I felt my grip tighten on the edge of the door. "I think you need to leave." "I'm not leaving until we..." "Yes, you are," I cut in, my voice steady in a way I didn't quite feel. "This isn't your house. I'm asking you to go. If you don't, I'll call the police." His eyes locked on mine. 3 seconds, long enough to feel like something was shifting, breaking, in a way that wouldn't go back. "You're going to end up alone," he said quietly. "And when he doesn't need you anymore, you'll realize you gave up everything for someone who's just going to move on." I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. He left, hard. The sound of his car peeling out of the driveway echoed longer than it should have. I closed the door slowly, locked it, stood there for a second, with my hand still on the handle. Behind me, Ethan exhaled. "Hey," he said lightly. "Eggs still happening? Or did I just ruin breakfast?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Eggs are happening." We ate at the kitchen counter. Didn't talk about it. Didn't need to. But something had shifted. Not between us. Around us. He wasn't done. Not even close. The next week, he called my mother. My mother. I found out because she called me that night. Her voice wasn't angry. It was... confused. "Baby," she said gently. "A man named Ryan called me today." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. What did he say? There was a pause. "He said he was concerned about you." I let out a quiet breath. "Concerned how?" "He said you were isolating yourself, that you were sacrificing your future, that someone might need to intervene." That word hit something deep.
Intervene.
Like I was spiraling. Like I'd lost perspective. Like taking care of someone I loved was a problem that needed fixing. "I explained everything," I said softly. "The accident, the caregiving, the ultimatum." My mom was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that settled into my chest in a way I didn't expect. "He called me to report that you're taking care of your injured best friend," she said. "Like that's a problem." I swallowed. "Alyssa, that's the thing I'm most proud of you for." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, just breathing. Because sometimes, when you're in the middle of something, the exhaustion, the judgment, the constant pressure, you start to question yourself. You start wondering if maybe you are doing something wrong. If maybe you're choosing obligation over your own happiness in a way that isn't healthy. And then someone reminds you that loyalty isn't a flaw. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong again. A few days later, Ethan got a call from his half-sister. the one he barely knew. He put it on speaker, not because he needed to, because he wanted me to hear. Her voice was cautious.
Careful.
"I got a message from someone," she said. "She said she was concerned about your living situation." Ethan's expression didn't change. "What kind of concerns?" "She said someone might be taking advantage of you. That maybe you don't have full control over your finances or your care." The room went very still. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair.
Calm. Measured.
The way he always got when something actually mattered. "He's my best friend," he said. "She moved in to help me get dressed in the morning and make sure I don't end up with a blood clot and die." A pause. "She pays for half the groceries, half the utilities, doesn't touch my accounts, doesn't make decisions for me." Another pause. Then, quieter. "If you want to help instead, the guest room's open."
Silence.
Then, "No, I can't right now." "Okay," Ethan said simply, and that was it. She didn't call back. He looked at me after the call ended. "People really have a lot of time on their hands, huh?" I huffed out a quiet laugh. "Apparently." But inside, something had started to shift. Again, this wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This wasn't just someone struggling to accept a breakup. This was becoming something else. Something messier. Something that didn't feel like it was going to stop on its own. And I was starting to realize he wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying to make me regret choosing someone else. The next lie spread faster than the others, probably because it was uglier, and uglier stories always travel well. I found out through a mutual friend who sounded uncomfortable before she even said hello. "Ryan's telling people you moved in with Ethan because you were struggling financially," she said. "He's saying you're using his disability to get free housing." I closed my laptop slowly. There it was, a new version of me.
Convenient. Calculated. Parasitic.
I almost asked what else he'd said, but I already knew the answer. Enough. Enough to stain. Enough to stick. Enough that someone, somewhere, would repeat it with confidence, like they'd witnessed it themselves. "He's also saying you stopped paying bills at your old apartment," she added, "and that you have access to Ethan's settlement." That last part made my stomach turn. I sat very still, because some accusations are ridiculous, and some are dangerous. This one was both. Ethan had received a settlement after the accident, not a massive one. Not life-changing in the way people imagine when they hear that word. It covered medical debt, home modifications, a little cushion for the future. I had never touched $1 of it. I didn't even know the exact amount because it wasn't mine to know. He had a financial advisor. He had his own accounts. He handled his own money. But Ryan was out there telling people I was draining it, that I'd built myself a life on the back of Ethan's injury. And the lie didn't stay personal. That was the problem. It reached someone I worked with. A freelance client texted me one afternoon. "Hey, hope everything's okay at home." It was written casually, but I could hear the question underneath it. The rumor had reached my work, my reputation, my ability to be taken seriously by people who paid me. That was the moment it stopped being merely infuriating. That was the moment it became something I had to treat like a threat. I didn't call Ryan. I didn't text him. I didn't ask him what exactly he thought he was doing. People like him feed on reaction, on chaos, on the idea that if they throw enough mud, eventually you'll come back swinging. I wasn't going to do that. Instead, I did something that probably would have bored him. I got organized. I told the truth once. Just once. In a group chat with the mutual friends who were still half in and half out of my life, I laid out the timeline. Accident in April. Caregiving started immediately. Ultimatum in October. Breakup after that. Harassment since. Then I said something I meant with my whole chest. I wasn't going to keep defending myself against a fresh accusation every week. And anyone who believed a version of me built entirely out of someone else's bitterness without asking me first wasn't someone I needed close. After that, I stopped talking, not because I was afraid, because I was done performing innocence for an audience. What I did instead was build a paper trail. Every message Ryan had sent before I blocked him, saved. Every screenshot from mutual friends documenting what he'd been saying, archived. The text from my freelance contact, saved. My mother wrote down the date he called, what he said, how he framed it. Ethan documented the call from his half-sister. Then he did something that made my throat tighten a little. He wrote a short statement.
Clear. Direct.
Signed and dated. It said he had invited me to stay in his home, voluntarily. That I helped with caregiving at his request. That I had no access to his finances and no control over his accounts. His financial advisor added a letter confirming the same thing. I wasn't planning to sue Ryan. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was learning the lesson the last year had forced into both of us. Documentation is the only language institutions trust, and something in me said we were going to need it. I was right. It happened in early December. A social worker showed up at the house unannounced. I knew what it was the second I saw the badge clipped to her blazer and the apologetic stiffness in her posture. She introduced herself professionally, politely, and said a concern had been filed involving a vulnerable adult in the home. She needed to speak with Ethan alone. My whole body went cold. Not from fear, from fury, because I knew exactly who had done it. And I knew why. This wasn't concern. This was punishment dressed up in paperwork. I stepped outside without arguing, sat on the front porch in the winter air for 45 minutes with my hands shoved under my arms and my jaw locked so tight it ached. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked somewhere 2 houses down. A car rolled slowly past. Wind scraped dead leaves along the edge of the driveway. Inside, a stranger was asking my best friend whether he was safe in his own home, because a bitter man had decided not being chosen made him entitled to vengeance. I stared at the front yard and thought, with startling clarity, this is the moment he crossed from pathetic to dangerous. When Ethan finally opened the door, his expression was calm, too calm. Which was how I knew he was furious too. The social worker left a few minutes later. She gave me a brief, measured nod on the way out. Professional. Neutral. Case closed. I didn't ask questions until her car was gone. Then I turned to him. What did she ask? He rolled back into the living room, and I followed. The usual, he said. Whether I'm being coerced, whether I control my own care, whether anyone has access to my money without permission, whether I feel safe here. I closed my eyes. He continued, voice flat in a way that made it sharper. I showed her the letter from my financial advisor, my medication app, my PT schedule, all the paperwork. I told her exactly what happened. What did she say? That the complaint was vague, personal, pretty clearly motivated by conflict, not concern. He looked up at me then, and that it happens more than people think. That made me angrier than anything else. Not because I was surprised, because somewhere, somehow, this had happened enough times to become ordinary. Ethan studied my face for a second. Then he said softly, "She closed it today." I nodded, but the anger didn't go anywhere. It just changed shape. It got quieter, colder, useful. A week later, I sat in a lawyer's office with a man who charged $150 an hour and had the kind of practical voice that made drama sound small. I brought everything: the visit to the house, the call to my mother, the half-sister, the settlement lies, the damage to my professional reputation, the false welfare complaint. He read in silence for a while, then set the papers down and said, "You have enough for a cease and desist. If he continues after that, you'd likely have grounds for stronger action." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired enough to want a wall where there had been none. So I said, "Do it." The letter was formal, specific, precise. Every incident listed with dates. Every third-party contact named. A clear demand that Ryan cease contacting me, Ethan, my family, and anyone connected to our private affairs. It referenced the false report directly. It made one thing unmistakably clear. This was no longer a breakup story. This was harassment. And if he continued, it would be handled that way. The letter went out by certified mail. He signed for it on a Tuesday. After that, silence. Real silence. No messages through friends. No surprise appearances. No concerned calls. No new rumors filtering back to me like poison in polite packaging. Nothing. It was almost insulting in a way. How quickly he disappeared once consequences had letterhead. Some mutual friends drifted back after that. Not all of them. Some were gone for good. And honestly, by then, I preferred the clarity. The ones who returned mostly acted like nothing had happened. No grand apologies, no deep reckoning. Just casual messages. Hey, have you been? Want to grab coffee sometime? Saw this and thought of you. I let some of them back in. Not because I forgot, because I no longer needed them to confess what I already knew. The people who mattered had stayed. The rest had taught me something useful about who they were. My freelance client apologized directly, said he should have asked me first instead of letting gossip shape his impression. I appreciated that, more than I expected. We moved on, but I didn't forget the feeling of having to explain my own integrity because someone else couldn't accept rejection. That feeling lingers. It teaches you where the soft spots are. That winter, the house felt different. Not lighter exactly, just steadier, like something toxic had finally stopped pressing itself against the windows. Ethan noticed it too. One night, while I was labeling medication refills at the kitchen table, he wheeled past and said, "You look less like you're expecting a sniper." I looked up. Was I giving sniper? Definitely. Very tense shoulders. Strong, I might bite the mailman energy. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks, maybe months. And in that laugh was something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Relief. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that sneaks in after survival and sits down gently beside you. But even with the silence, even with the paperwork and the distance and the legal line in the sand, something in me had changed. I had spent months being watched, judged, accused, doubted, and somewhere inside all that noise, I'd lost the last part of myself that cared about looking understandable to people committed to misunderstanding me. That part never came back, and maybe that was for the best. By January, life didn't feel easier, but it felt stable. And after everything, that was more than enough. Ethan started a new round of physical therapy. 3 days a week, 2 hours each session. It was intense, exhausting in a way that didn't show up all at once, but settled deep into his shoulders, his arms, his breath. But there were changes, small ones, important ones. His therapist said there were early signs of nerve activity returning in his left leg. Not movement, not anything you could point to and say, there it is, but sensation, patches of it, which, apparently, meant something good, something worth holding on to, without promising too much. Ethan didn't talk about it like hope. He talked about it like data. Progress is progress, he said one morning, while I helped him adjust into his chair. Even if it's microscopic. But I saw it in the way he pushed a little harder during exercises, in the way he started watching wheelchair basketball videos like they were game film instead of just background noise, in the way his voice changed just slightly when he talked about the future. We found a rhythm, not perfect, not easy, but ours. I handled mornings most days, helped him with his routine, breakfast, getting everything lined up for the day. A home health aide covered the hours I couldn't. We stopped trying to make everything seamless and started focusing on making it sustainable. That shift mattered more than anything. The insurance company finally approved additional care hours after our third appeal. A 6-page letter where I quoted their own policy back at them like I was arguing a case in court. When the approval came through, I just stared at the email for a full minute before forwarding it to Ethan with a single message. "We win this round," he replied. "Final mid-level boss," I sent back. "Final boss is still out there." Somewhere in the middle of all that, I met Daniel. He was a respiratory therapist at the hospital where Ethan did his PT. We'd seen each other in passing for weeks. The kind of familiar stranger you don't notice until you suddenly do. One afternoon, after I'd been sitting in the waiting area for nearly 2 hours, he walked past, paused, then doubled back. "You're either the most dedicated friend I've ever seen," he said, or you're stalking someone in this building. I looked up at him, tired, slightly amused. Can it be both? He smiled. Not in a way that felt practiced, in a way that felt easy. Coffee? He asked. We kept it simple. Coffee turned into a walk. A walk turned into dinner. Dinner turned into something that didn't need to be defined right away. And for the first time in a long time, nothing about it felt like a negotiation. I told him everything early. Ethan, the accident, the caregiving, Ryan, the rumors, the legal letter. I didn't soften it, didn't frame it in a way that made me easier to accept. I just told the truth. Daniel listened, really listened. Then he said something that caught me off guard. So you're loyal, he said. And you know how to handle difficult situations. A small pause. Those are pretty good qualities. I blinked. That's your takeaway? He shrugged lightly. Seems like the important part. He met Ethan on our third date. I warned him ahead of time. Ethan, naturally, ignored every warning. Daniel walked into the living room, introduced himself, and before I could even sit down, Ethan looked at him, then at me, and said, "Wow, massive upgrade." I closed my eyes. Daniel laughed. Not awkwardly, not defensively. He just laughed. And that was the moment I knew this might actually work. He didn't compete with Ethan, didn't treat my time like something to be negotiated or divided. Sometimes when he came over, he'd help with exercises, adjust positioning, offer suggestions that came from training, not opinion. It wasn't forced. It wasn't performative. It was just part of being there. And for the first time, I understood what it felt like for someone to step into my life without trying to rearrange it. As for Ryan, I heard things. Not directly, never directly, but stories have a way of circling back. Apparently, what happened between us didn't stay contained. The welfare check, the rumors, the persistence. At some point, people started comparing notes, and when they did, the version of him that had seemed controlled and reasonable started to crack. A few mutual friends distanced themselves from him, not because of the breakup, because of how far he'd taken it. Because there's a difference between being hurt and trying to dismantle someone else's life because of it. That difference matters, more than people like to admit. I also heard he left his job around the same time everything happened. I don't know why, and I didn't ask. Some things aren't mine to understand. He tried to reach out one more time. Not to me, to Ethan. A message on Instagram. Short. Polished. I never had a problem with you. I just wanted my relationship to be a priority. I hope you're recovering well. Ethan showed it to me, raised an eyebrow. Do I respond? I thought about it for a second, then shrugged. Your call. He read it again, let out a quiet breath, then said, "She literally tried to get a social worker to investigate you." A pause. Then he deleted it. Just like that. No response, no speech, no closure. And that was it. I know some people expect a different ending. A confrontation, an apology, a moment where everything is acknowledged and resolved neatly. That's not this story. I don't hate Ryan. Hate requires energy, and I've learned, very specifically, where I want mine to go, into things that matter, like figuring out how to make a kitchen accessible with nothing but plywood and stubbornness, like learning that insurance appeals are basically a genre of creative writing, like watching Ethan pick up a basketball from his chair for the first time, line up the shot, and hit nothing but net. Then yell, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Paralyzed, not dead." The thing no one tells you about caregiving is that it changes you. Not in the way people write about in inspirational quotes, in quieter ways, more permanent ones. You get good at reading pain in someone's face before they say a word. You learn that 3 a.m. muscle spasms are just part of the routine. You stop measuring your choices against other people's expectations because your choices are keeping someone you love alive, and everything else starts to feel secondary. Ryan wanted me to choose. I did. And if you asked me again today, I'd make the same choice, without hesitation, without regret, every single time.